Ancient Egyptian pharaohs were hiding something in their DNA, and when scientists finally uncovered it, it didn't just challenge history, it exposed a truth that had been buried for over 3,000 years. Inside the mummified remains of Egypt's most powerful rulers, locked away in tombs for millennia, was a genetic story, a story that directly contradicted what historians had believed for centuries about who these rulers were, where they came from, and how their power actually passed from one generation to the next. For nearly 2 centuries, Egyptologists built their understanding of ancient Egypt using written records, hieroglyphic inscriptions, temple carvings, papyrus documents. These sources created what seemed like a complete picture: detailed family trees, clear successions, pharaohs shown alongside their wives and children. Everything appeared structured, logical, predictable. Khufu built the Great Pyramid, his son Khafre followed, then Menkaure. Dynasties rose and fell in a pattern that seemed easy to trace. This became accepted history, but there was one problem. These records were never neutral. They were written by people serving the pharaoh. They were designed to protect power, not reveal the truth. And for thousands of years, no one could challenge them, until something changed. In the early 2000s, scientists developed the ability to extract DNA from ancient remains, not fragments of history, but actual biological data preserved inside mummies for thousands of years. For the first time, they could test what had been written against what was real, and almost immediately things didn't line up. In 2010, a team led by Zahi Hawass published a study analyzing DNA from royal mummies stored in Cairo. Among them was Tutankhamun, the boy king whose tomb was discovered by Howard Carter in 1922. What they found changed everything. Tutankhamun's parents were siblings, not distant relatives, not political allies, brother and sister. The DNA was clear, there was no ambiguity, and this wasn't mentioned anywhere in the official historical record. It got worse. Tutankhamun's wife, Ankhesenamun, was his half-sister. Their genetic relationship was confirmed through the same analysis, and Tutankhamun himself showed severe physical issues: a club foot, skeletal deformities, signs of genetic damage. These weren't random conditions. They were the result of generations of inbreeding. Now here's where it gets even more unsettling. Even when researchers expanded their analysis to other pharaohs across the 18th dynasty, they found this wasn't an exception. It was a system. Brother, sister, marriages, father-daughter unions, close relative relationships repeated across generations. This wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Historians had always suggested that royal families married within themselves to protect power, to prevent outsiders from claiming the throne, and that explanation made sense. But the DNA revealed something deeper, something harder to explain. When scientists compared royal DNA to the general Egyptian population, they found clear differences. The ruling families carried genetic markers that didn't fully match the surrounding population. Some suggested connections to regions outside the Nile Valley, possibly the Near East, possibly beyond. And instead of blending into the population over time, they didn't. They stayed distinct, generation after generation. It was almost as if they were trying to preserve something, not just power, not just status, but a specific bloodline. And this raises a question historians still struggle with. Why would a ruling family go this far? Why risk genetic damage to their own children, just to avoid mixing with the general population? Why maintain isolation so aggressively for centuries? To understand that, you have to look at the sources themselves, the inscriptions, the king lists, the official histories. These weren't objective records. They were controlled narratives. When rulers changed, history changed with them. Names were erased, images destroyed, entire reigns rewritten or removed. If something didn't serve the image of divine power, it simply wasn't recorded. So if sibling marriages were happening regularly, they could be hidden. If bloodline origins were different from what was claimed, they could be rewritten. For centuries, historians trusted these records because they were the only evidence available. But DNA doesn't follow political agendas. It doesn't protect reputations. It doesn't lie. And what it revealed was clear. The rulers of ancient Egypt were operating within a controlled genetic system. They were making deliberate reproductive choices. They were preserving a distinct lineage despite the consequences. The written records barely mention it. The monuments don't explain it. The official history avoids it, but the DNA shows it happen over and over again for centuries. And that leads to a final question, one that still doesn't have a clear answer. If the pharaohs were willing to hide this much about their own bloodline, what else did they choose not to record? Because now we know something important. What was written in stone wasn't always the truth, and what was hidden in their DNA might only be the beginning.